Setting up. I think we are.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. All right. I'm waiting for the small little redirect. Done. Redirecting. Great. All right. We are live. Fantastic. All right. Hi, Lindsay.
Hey,
Good to be here with you today. Hello to all of our Global Healing Collective community. Excited to join you on this Monday for a Conscious Business Spotlight with Lindsay Pera. And to talk about her work in the world, what she's putting into the world. She is a Global Healing Collective catalyst. She has given us money, funds to invest into our work and to what we're doing. And so super grateful to have you here today, Lindsay.
So honored to be here. I'm a firm believer in what you're doing. Just really honored to be a part of the conversation and the movement.
Cool. So we start these conversations very simply with what inspired you to begin building and creating the business that you have right now. So take that and tell us a little bit about the work,
Sure.
but then also what brought it into existence.
Sure. So, hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Pera. I'm the founder of the Modern Mystics Institute and holder of a new paradigm business community called the Mystic Society. And I found my way into this conversation and this role as a catalyst with this community via a shared speaking engagement with my business partners with the Simply Sacred company. So I wear a lot of different hats, but they're all woven together with this common thread of a belief that there is a new way to do business and that we're being called up and hired to show up in those ways. And that by allowing ourselves to have that conversation, we can allow for profitability and sacred commerce without compromising those other elements, the people, the planet, our heart, our ability to create and sustain meaningful connections. So I came into doing this work in the world actually through pretty traditional business channels. I started out in management consulting and in software and in IT and Silicon Valley. But like so many people who kind of are a part of the machine in that way, I found myself burnt out and sick and became one of the people who felt that they had to take the grand leap, and I think we can all relate to that thinking in some way, whether it's like, I have to leap from the marriage, or I have to leap from the, geography that I'm living, or I have to leap from the job. Well, I was certainly one of those people. I had this longstanding dream and vision of moving to the country and raising my kids with goats and being out in the orchard and being done with the whole business conversation. I had grown up at the base of Sand Hill to parents who were lifers with Hewlett Packard. And so dinner table conversation was always software and process and strategy. And so I thought the best thing in the world would be just leaving it all and going out to the country. So we did. We became that family. We moved to a 40-acre multi-generational homestead on the central coast of California. We built a straw bale house and we started living very closely to the earth. But what is interesting about that kind of grand leap is you often find that the same work that was wanting to be done where you were shows up still wanting to be done wherever you land. And for me, that meant that within just a couple of weeks of landing in my new world, I was already finding my way into conversations that wanted to be had around strategy and business, only in a new way. I wasn't going to get paid, but I heard that one of the local nonprofits that I cared deeply about needed some help with their board and some strategy work. And before you know, I was like, well, that's kind of what I do. I could do that. So I spent the next couple of years unraveling or releasing, maybe is a better way to say it, the story that business or work had to look a certain way, that it had to deplete you, that it had to be a trade-off between your health and your livelihood, that it was in service to something maybe you did or didn't believe in. And I began to find that there were ways to invite and allow the full wheel of my experiences and my business experience, my passion for software, my passion for technology, and still do it in a way that was meaningful and that was that was producing a result that felt more aligned with what I thought I was on the planet to do and the way I could be of service to humanity. So from there, it was truly a journey of evolution. Along the way, we had a surprise bonus number 3 baby who was born, and she was born with some severe neurological issues that ultimately led us to learn that part of my health issues back in my corporate days was actually undiagnosed Lyme disease. And so I had passed that Lyme disease on to my children. Part of our holistic lifestyle was kind of like self-medicating in a positive way until we learned of our diagnosis. But my very first step into true business again was in response to that health crisis, and the reality that when we face a health crisis, often it can impact our relationships, it impacts our finances. And my little life on the farm, we needed to have different ways to address the financial crisis we found ourselves in. So I started consulting, and I had the amazing experience of consulting with an organization that was doing business the way I wanted to do it as a solopreneur, that cared about the planet, cared about its people, allowed for heart and spirituality right there at the strategic planning table. There were so many ways that it activated me to granting me permission to do business different ways. I have been an intuitive and an empath since a young age, but I learned also at a young age that you don't show up in a boardroom talking about your intuition. It was okay instead to talk about your gut. That was okay. Or it was okay to say it this way, but not that way. Or it was okay to be this person, but not that person. This working for the H. Shields Institute and bringing my energy there was really the first time I started to truly value all of my past business experience, because I was able to use it and implement it in a way that felt so in service. I met my business partner, Erin Baker, there. Our very first step into our own entrepreneurship, aside from consulting, was a software company to support people in navigating their way through chronic illness. We wanted to offer people tracking tools that enabled them to see themselves whole and to identify the things that were working, not just their symptoms, help them understand how some of the factors that other tracking wasn't making room for, like nature connection, meditation, dietary changes, might actually influence your symptoms, not just the medications that you're being prescribed. I really liked this idea of releasing people from the story that they were stuck in their diagnosis or stuck in their way of being. And then it was just kind of the process of growing that business that then caused people to start reaching out to me and saying, I see you creating things, being an entrepreneur, being a consultant in a way that's different than other people. You still live in the country. You're making it work for you. You seem to prioritize your children and your health. How are you doing these things? Because I'm hearing from clients, I'm still stuck, or I'm still sick, or I'm still feeling like I'm trading off between my home life and my work life, whatever that might be. And that's really what led me to create the Mystic Society and the Modern Mystics Institute, was this idea. I have some thought leadership and some offerings to bring to people about how they can rethink what business is, how they can walk it differently themselves. Most of the people who find their way into that community are emerging leaders who know that if they don't start doing it differently, they're not going to have different results for themselves or their coworkers or the culture of their business, or ultimately downstream to their clients or patients or whatever it might be. I think sometimes there's a perception when people see my work from the outside that it must be all intuitives and woo-woo people on the inside. I think everybody there feels called by a deeper knowing that we have more to our senses and more to our knowing than maybe we have been taught in prior generations, that we're remembering these lost arts. But we have people in this group who are Wall Street attorneys, who are doctors, who are lawyers, who are environmental activists, who are walking their path in so many different ways, but are ready to do it in a different way and to link arms with others who aren't willing to settle for what we've been told business has to look like. So from that place, I just have continued to evolve into the place of speaking, writing books. The partnership that I mentioned, Simply Sacred Company, evolved from a long relationship with two other women who are like, I see what you're doing. I have a slightly different piece. Let's bring our pieces together and do it in a good way. So the new paradigm business way is all about letting go of the stories of competition, letting go of the stories that it's a zero-sum game, letting go of the stories that we kind of have to compromise people and planet in order to be profitable and to do good work in the world. And that's, I think, what landed me in this seat as a catalyst and supporting the work that you all do.
Love it.
Thank you.
That was super powerful, and I think that what I walk away with is from just that one piece, one question, was the idea that that there's an iteration to
Yes.
our own involvement as entrepreneurs, as solopreneurs, as individuals, as humans who outside of anything work related, and our work is continuing to find ways to be able to piece to find those pieces along the pathway for
Yes.
not only the personal side of things, but also the business part. And, and you hit upon a bunch of pieces there that said, from a personal perspective, it was good for you to move to this place. From a business perspective, it was good for you to take on, you seems like you honored a lot of these calls, so to speak, that you got from whether they were locally or they were not, wherever they might have come from, and continued to find ways to bring together the consulting and professional services that you're providing, right? And I say professional services because because you did say there, the people that are in your work are looking for not only just the help with their own awareness involvement, their own spiritual growth, their own mindset shifts. They're also looking for, okay, what does that look like for my own offerings as an organization or as an individual? So that's really cool. And you answered the other question, which is, why is your mission or work important to leaders and change makers? But I'll give you an opportunity. Is there anything else that you would add to that great answer that you just gave about why your work in a variety of capacities that you're still doing right now is important?
Absolutely. I appreciate that opportunity, because there is one aspect or tenet of my work that I am so passionate about right now that I've really been kind of trying to create ripples of it everywhere that I go. And that is a concept of right livelihood. And this is not something that I've coined. This is not my own term. The use of those words in that way actually comes from the Buddhist tradition. But if you look to our original instructions or even cultures around the world, you see that there's this concept in a lot of our traditional cultures, this idea of right livelihood is something that would have you believe that there's a reason that you're on the planet, and that by aligning yourself to it, good things start to happen. The way that we've adapted that and brought it forward in terms of offerings and thought leadership to encourage people to think about what right livelihood might be for them is by breaking it down into 3 core pillars. The idea that to really be aligned to our right livelihood, first, we have to do exactly what you're saying. We have to be able to hone our awareness skills to get clear on what is our own soul purpose and path. What are the yeses and the nos? Along the way, I had a lot of yeses. Yes to the country. Yes to doing things virtually. Yes to being very strategic about where I put my time and energy and money. But there were also no's. I had an unbelievable opportunity sitting in a conference room in San Francisco with an angel fund that wanted to support my software company, but their requirement was that I move back to the Bay Area and have a headquarters. And it was hard to say no in that moment, but I was really, really clear. There was a reason. I was following a path. I was modeling something different. And I was doing that for myself first, but also for the ripples that creates. So there are yeses and nos along the path of finding your soul purpose and path, which is kind of that first pillar. The second pillar is one I'm also really passionate about, which is sacred commerce. And it's this idea that, despite what we might see in modern times of capitalism, commerce actually has its origins back in a sacred tradition, that actually at its very roots, it was an act of peacemaking. The very first time we were willing to exchange something instead of just hitting each other over the head for the thing that we wanted, that you had, that I didn't have, that was a sacred gesture. That was an act of respect. That was an act of exchange. And if you track that through to the merchant priests and priestess who used to oversee the marketplace and brought their prayer and intention that every melon brought to the market would find its home and its need, and vice versa. Everything that you might have to sell would also be of service, that we can get back to a way of thinking of exchange and commerce that does allow for this thing that means that spirituality and the sacred nature is not mutually exclusive from the bottom line. So that's the second pillar. But the third is just as important to me, and that's this idea of leadership and legacy, that when we put those first 2 things in place, that we become aware of the fact that we are leaving footsteps in the sand, that we are actually leaving breadcrumbs for those who would follow them. And we innately and naturally find our way into our legacy and leadership. And that what that brings is, that means at the end of the day, whether today is the first day embarking on your new way, or whether it's your last day, this is the day that Lindsay gets, struck by lightning and it all comes to an end. It means that you are actually living your purpose on the planet. You can rest in a tremendous amount of peace no matter what life brings your way. And so the some result of this equation of right livelihood is that you end up really clear on why you're in the planet. You're standing in your leadership to show up in that capacity, and you're getting compensated really, really well to do it. Within the right livelihood space, I spend a lot of time deconstructing limiting beliefs and stories. I spend a lot of time busting myths like the starving artist, the starving healer, the idea that you'd have to trade your family life for a successful career. Because ultimately, I think I'm on my own sole purpose is to channel resources into the hands of the change makers, to actually say it doesn't have to be an either or, it can be a yes and. There is in fact a third door that you can walk through, and on the other side of that door you have a deep knowing that you are showing up to do exactly what you came into this place to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm a little
Beautiful.
bit passionate about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful, and I think about, our as people watch this back, where do they see more? Is there a piece where they can go and to look into more of the work that you're doing? Is there a book that they should read? Is there a retreat they should attend? Like what is the right livelihood? What does that look like from an integration, or from moving forward type of perspective?
Great question. Well, in terms of resources to learn more about right livelihood, you can find them on my blog at mysticsociety.com. In terms of maybe having more conversations about what that third door can look like, we do a weekly Facebook Live at the Modern Mystics Institute Facebook page, only for the conversations of what is the third door and how do we move out of the either or. We have conversations ranging from peacemaking and how to navigate challenging dialogue. I'm thinking of Beth Wanson's work here too. The work of those who are bringing new forms of communication into their legal work or their medical work. So it really is a place to start to apply some of these principles to your individual work, and maybe hopefully be inspired by the community that you'd see around there. And then I think ultimately seeking more resources on the conversation of the finance piece itself is one I can't encourage people in business enough to do. You guys did such a great job of that at WalkFest. You modeled it also through the conscious marketplace, bringing in the conversation of conscious capitalism. Sacred commerce is one of my favorite go-tos to recommend to people for thinking about right livelihood. Iman's work is wonderful, and he's so good at bridging the two sides of the equation between the business and the finance side, but also the emotional literacy that it takes to begin to do things in new ways. And the fact that we have to bring emotional literacy into our organizational spaces. The other thing I love about the way you guys are bringing it forward is it doesn't have to be all through entrepreneurship. I don't actually think we're going to see the type of global shift that we all want to see until we actually affect change from within our biggest organizations. And we're starting to see that happen. And that really excites me. If I can get to one person with a conversation of right livelihood before they've taken the leap and help them actually claim the change and the transformation from right where they are, sure, maybe their career will take them in a different direction, but it will be because they have laid a foundation of truth, and that will begin to ripple out from the very insides of our biggest companies. We're already seeing it. We're seeing entire paradigms shifting, entire industries beginning to shift, and that's really exciting. So truly, any way that a person watching this feels called to seek more resources about right livelihood, I would say follow that particular thread. Start with yourself. Sometimes it's as easy as just changing how you show up in the environment that you're already in, not so much about the thing we think we need, which is to burn it all down or make the great leap. Those little tiny shifts can entirely change the course of the direction of the ship that you're on.
Yeah, when we continue to chat with people about, the ways in which that they come about, I feel like we're come about this change,
Yeah.
whether it's the incremental approach that you're talking about, or it's the leap, or somewhere in between, right?
Yep.
The some people need that leap in order to be able
Sure.
to shock to shock the system. I did as well, right?
Yep.
I needed
Yep.
to move across the country and
Yep.
move to a place I didn't have any clue anybody and didn't know anybody here.
Right.
And so that's turned out well for me. but did I
Yes.
know that,
Right.
15 years ago when I made that choice? No, but like
Yeah.
I had enough
Yeah.
of a, of an alignment. And so, but just continuing to find those ways that we can take this, I'll just say, incredible amount of information that's available to us right now,
Yeah.
and convert that into to integrating it into right livelihood,
Yes.
integrating it into an incremental shift in the way that we're actually approaching the proposals that we put in the world for
Yes.
work, the proposals we put in the world for ourselves. And yeah, it's not a simple. It is not a simple. We're not trying to bypass the complexity that
No.
can or cannot happen, right?
Yep.
But it's the approach that you might take when those I loved hearing about was your challenge with getting the offer, right? For
Mm-hmm.
and that tension that probably happened for
Mm-hmm.
probably quite some time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of do I or do I not, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when we look at the ripple, that the next question of how do you see your work as a catalyst creating a ripple of impact, I'd love to go back to that moment
Mm-hmm.
and how
Mm-hmm.
long ago that was, and to see how that that drop in the water of no
Mm-hmm.
has continued to evolve for you as a ripple.
Mm. I love that question. I have never been asked that question. I want to track it back and say that it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, that moment. Um, I think there was less friction than you'd think because it was actually so clear to me. And it also is the way the universe allowed the moment to unfold. It was also a full circle moment because, of course, my experience in software and in IT and also in management consulting happened just a few blocks away from where this conversation was happening. So it was a return back to what was. And of course, I was returning with new eyes, new vocabulary, a new way of being. But I actually was in a space of total clarity. So I think there was even less negotiation than those loving people on the other side of the table expected, because I was really clear. That doesn't mean it didn't feel like a bit of a free fall in a vacuum outside I mean, driving home from that, it was just deafening silence, thinking, wow, this is how clear I am about what I will and won't allow or design in my current picture, my creative scene for how this work wants to be done. A tremendous pivot happened after that. The idea of growing a software company in the way that I wanted to didn't feel achievable without the resources behind it. I had to identify what pieces of the software component were still really important to me. So we pivoted at that time from creating, software in the health space into creating tools for personal transformation in ways that I could do it in alignment with the resources and the lifestyle, the amount of time that I wanted to work. So Shift Wheel app was created at that time, which still supports people with chronic illness, but it supports people wherever they are on their transformational journey. Maybe their challenges in the health space, but maybe it's in the financial space. Maybe it's in the space of finding their love, their relationship healing that they're seeking. And so this app then allowed us to white label and to create a livelihood from apps and technology in a way that worked for us remotely. And then ultimately, everything that flowed out of it came from people witnessing me do that, witnessing me make the hard choice, witnessing the clear no, witnessing the pivots. I think that there are times when pivots can be detrimental to this conversation of right livelihood because sometimes we don't persist in the ways that we could. But I also think pivots are one of the greatest asset we have because they allow us to make those small incremental changes. What if you were to think of every turn around the Nautilus of your right livelihood as a gentle pivot? Because you don't stay on a straight line. You evolve, it evolves, your client evolves, our technology climate evolves, everything evolves. And so, I don't know. I guess I just would say that that moment actually was more of a choice point than maybe I even recognized. And I really appreciate the question because I can see the ways in which everything since it has been a ripple from that clear moment.
Yeah, and what a great example of your honing your yes and no for
Right.
right livelihood. Whether at the time it was actually called that for yourself, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not,
It
I'm not
wasn't.
sure.
No, it
But
wasn't.
but going back to there and just saying, okay, how can I reflect back on when that was that firm yes or no, and then say, okay, what are those micro
Yeah.
pivots, those micro
Yeah.
steps? Maybe they're bigger steps that are making that huge macro difference, right?
Yeah.
And being in the software field myself, I can appreciate the fact that you want that investment,
Right.
but then there's trade-offs to that,
Right.
just like there's trade-offs to not taking it.
Yep.
And then to your point, you found ways to leverage what you had,
Yep.
which is just a great story to continue to unpack as we continue our your work in the Global Healing Collective, our work together. I think that it's going to be great to continue to unpack with this right livelihood work that you're doing, the co-creative work that you're doing, and so thank you for bringing those pieces
Yeah, thank you.
to our conversation. It's great.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
so my last question is that
Yeah.
do you have an ask for our community? What's an ask that you might have for
I
Global Healing
do.
Collective?
And it's big, and it's also so doable. But my ask is actually to not settle. We call our community, within our community, we often identify ourselves as mystics. It's just the nickname that we've given each other, because we are people who are committed to seeing things in new ways and hearing things in new ways and applying it. So it's a modern alchemy, if you will. But at its origin is a commitment that we make to not settle. And the idea of not settling is the thing that actually keeps that spark and that ripple that you're describing alive. Because if we allow ourselves to become complacent and settle, we can find that even a success within right livelihood can mean that you can end up 2 years down the path having gotten off path again. So we build in core routines that allow us to keep our presence practices up. Does this still work for me? Is my body still saying yes? Am I still seeing the result? Am I still making the same choices? As you grow and you scale your business, you can find yourself in a position where you've made compromises. And some of those compromises serve really well, but some of them can serve, if they accumulate over time, in starting to have the pendulum swing back to the side of imbalance. And so we love to say this thing, mystics don't let mystics settle. And if I could put that on loan to all those in the Global Healing Collective and say, please don't settle. And if you could identify 1 or 2 places where you are settling in your life, not just in your business, but in your life, ask for help or support around that. If it's in your relationships, any work you do on your relationships is going to end up serving how you show up in your business world. Or if it's on the business side, I never felt great about that vendor. The choices I'm making because of that don't feel in alignment with what I'm doing. Ask for support around that. And the more we can allow ourselves to not settle, what I find is we bring innovative solutions and we invite ourselves to step through that third door and to take others along with us. We all start to think and see things in new ways. And that is what continues to create that exponential shift that we're looking for.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Totally. I appreciate you in stepping forward in the point in time when you did as a catalyst. It's been a year. It's been a year, and so but it's been great to know that we have that continued support, from you and
Absolutely.
from your colleagues and from all of our catalysts, to be able to continue to move forward this idea of bringing that support that you're talking about to change maker, leader,
Yes.
organizations, whatever that looks like. We're really just trying to create the space,
Yes.
to do that. We all are in our own ways, and the more that we each individually make space, the bigger the space will continue to get. So
Yeah, I just
thank
have
you.
to interject and say you're doing so much more than creating the space. So anyone who's watching, this is a place to stay and keep watching, because not only is it a safe place, but it's also the place, and you're hosting the conversations within that space, and then you're creating the connections that will actually give those life. So I am a huge fan. I am highly committed and invested in what you're doing. I'm cheering you on from afar, and I'm just honored to be a part of the conversation.
Cool. Well, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Lindsay Pera,
Yes,
everybody.
thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Until next time.